Welcome to Source One Saturday Night Light Mashup. My name is Nico Lagan, my co-host Jason Levique. This week we are joined by special guests Pat King, Wayne Peters, Dan Fournier, and Matt Ehret to speak about one single thing. Why is Mark Carney destroying a relationship with the U.S.? Let's start with a quick round table, starting with my co-host Jason. What's going on, brother?
Good evening, God brother. I hope you're well. And look, we got East, West, and everything in between here tonight. I'm Jason Levine, the host of the Levine Show. You can catch me in the mornings every single weekday with my wife as we do tea and coffee with Paul and Jay, as we cover all the issues that are important, especially out west in Alberta. And hopefully, I know Pat's looking for this, we can leave. And I'm really glad that Pat's joining us today because maybe he can explain why all over America and Canada they were doing protests against him. No more kings. Maybe he can explain to us why they were going after him like that. But I'm really glad that Wayne, Matt, Dan, and Pat came together tonight quickly to do this roundtable.
Yes, sir. Well, thanks for having me, gentlemen. It's a pleasure always. This is a big topic to unpack. I'm glad I got a panel of people that we can actually probably give some good eye-awakening, opening stuff about what's really going on. I know that in my travels, I can definitely link it back to a minimum of 6 years right now where this was all pre-planned to happen. And we'll just start it with that, but definitely got some juicy stuff when it comes to that.
Awesome. Thanks, Pat. Matt?
Yeah, absolutely. This is something that's been on the forefront of my mind, is the relationship between Canada and the United States since I really started getting my head into this more critical way of thinking about reality. It's been the basis of all of my books that I've written about the untold history of Canada. So definitely, I think we're gonna have a fun conversation, and Carney's certainly setting things up for a big mess. So yeah, it's gonna provide fuel for a lot of conversation.
Sergeant Wayne?
If you don't know me, you must be living under a rock. Wayne Peters, the host, chief cookbook and bottle washer over at What's Up Canada. And there's nothing new under the sun. I think we're dealing with a case of the Empire strikes again and again and again and again and again and again. And we're going to have a lot to chew on with that, I'm sure, here tonight with the micro unpacking of some of it.
And at the end of that rabbit hole, we got Dan. Hello, Dan.
Oh, rabbit hole. Yeah, that's the name of my podcast, Down the Rabbit Hole. All right. So if anybody doesn't know me, I'm from La Belle Province, also known as the Shadow of the Bomb, Quebec. So I'm a longtime educator turned into a very underpaid independent investigative journalist, fully black-pilled, but armed with truth and the power of God. And my second most viewed Substack article, which I published on the day he was selected, it was 4 months in the making. That article is Meet Canada's new Prime Minister, Mark Carney, who will usher in his globalist climate swindle.
So there you go, Nico. I think we got the panel tonight for this topic. I hope you enjoy yourself.
I agree, man. It's a bunch of conspiracy theorists getting to speak about the real problem that Canada's facing. Because at the end of the day, I say this all the time, but Carney's here to finish what Trudeau started. And really, he started it behind the scene with Trudeau as the puppet. But we are really looking at a globalist agenda that's being pushed by Mark Carney. And we can see that the first thing he's doing is destroying our relationship with the U.S. and trying to align us with China, which right then and there should send chills down everybody's back. If that you don't think that's a problem, wake the fuck up, because that's a massive fucking problem. And we'll start right there, because the question is simple. Why is he doing it? At the end of the day, why is Mark Carney destroying our relationship with the U.S.? And I see Pat's already laughing, so I'm going to start right there. So Pat, if you want to rant away, the microphone's yours, brother.
You're muted.
But you need to unmute yourself first, though.
Sorry. Yeah. Oh, man. Where do you want to start with, Mark? You can go all the way back to, you know, the early recession in Canada. We already saw a little bit of his track record. Some of us weren't paying attention so much back then when he was under Harper. But it's awesome that the internet lasts forever. But where I can take it to when it comes to Mark Carney and some of the bullshit that we've seen coming from him, I didn't even know at the time. I knew who he was. I knew at the time he was the governor of the Bank of England. But I was in Montreux, Switzerland. I was investigating a Bilderberg conference. And it turns out we had 3 delegates from Canada, Michael Sabia, Louise Arbour, and Dominic Baltzan, who was the head of McKinsey Inc. And I didn't even know until Mark Carney started peeking his head up, till we started hearing him about, you know, his company that had the, what were they, the heat condenser, air conditioning stuff. He owned the company or something like that. So we start hearing about Mark Carney, and then I go through some of my photos, and I've got Mark Carney on the boat in Bilderberg on Lake Geneva, and I'm like, oh shit, he was at the Bilderberg conference. And the agenda, we all know when it comes to those kind of societies, is Sustainable Development Goals, United Nations agendas. They wanted to push the UN Migrant Compact, so Louise Arbour was there. We had Dominic Baltzan, who head of McKinsey Inc., was going to get the contracts for the 15-minute cities all over Canada. And then Michael Sabia at the time was the CEO of Quebec Pension Plan. And now he's the deputy finance minister, was the deputy finance minister under Chrystia Freeland, who's actually the one who's in charge of freezing bank accounts in Canada. So if anybody wants to know who that is. So Mark Carney and him are chummy chum, right? Then you've got Mark and all the allegations that he did against the Bank of England. You see the state of England right now and the way England's running and how much of a nightmare it is for them. And then he gets appointed here. And I say appointed. He was never elected through the party, through the proper channels, through the way things were going, because he was selected, not elected. And he's the banker, right? He knows how to push the books. He even knows how to cook the books. So he knows how to move money around, and he's coming in, basically, in my opinion, he is about to get the books ready. Donald Trump is the largest merger and acquisitions billionaire in the world. And with the tanking of our economy in Canada, it's going to make us ripe for the pickings. And they want that one world government, and they want the North American Union, is what Trump likes to boast about. He wants to scoop us up for the highest dollar, or sorry, for the lowest dollar, to the highest bidder. And Trump is the king of doing that. He knows how to buy companies. He knows how to merger them. He knows how to basically take over. And Carney's laying the trap for him. And it's all by design. We know this. We've been watching these United Nations agendas coming down the pipeline for the last 15 to 20 years. And it's just playing right into their pocketbook. And now we see this new budget coming out from Carney. That's all a plan. Another $100 million predicted on top of already a 62 or 68 billion dollar deficit that we're going into. And you're seeing the commercials coming out, you know, the commercials with Doug Ford tanking the tariffs, basically sticking his nose up to Donald Trump. And then you find out Carney backed the approval for the $75 million loan. Not only that, they paid into a agency down in the United States to make these hit pieces, and it backfired. But now they're saying, oh, now the Canadians got to sacrifice a little bit longer. He came in saying one thing, and now he's turncoated 180 degrees, and it's all by design. And if nobody wants to believe that, it's going to get even worse for you. I don't know how long it's going to take till it gets personal for people, because I find that's the only time when people will actually say something or stand up and do anything, is when it finally becomes personal for you. But how's the saying go? If one person says it, okay, not too much. But when millions of people are screaming this and people don't want to stand up and make the difference, they're talking. He's trying to duck an election because he knows when he comes out with his budget prediction next week. I think it's next week, or did they stall it again? I don't know. Anybody know?
It's the 4th. It's November 4th.
Yeah. So this week when he comes out with it, he knows there's a possibility of a non-confidence vote, and it's just another stall technique. If it's not a stall technique, it's going to become a means for them to get the majority so that they can fast forward exactly what Carney's here to do. And for anybody out there, I'm not saying this to the people that agree with us. And so I'm talking to the people that don't agree with us, who think this is a far out to left field conspiracy theories. This is actually playing out in real time in front of your faces. And it's no longer a left and right problem. It's an all of us problem. And it's getting to be pretty serious, to the point that, we're sending $75 million to ads to tank our economy. And we've got people homeless on the streets. We got drug addictions. We've got all of the horrible stuff that's degrading our society, this beautiful country that we have. And nobody wants to stand up. Nobody wants to say anything. Like, that's my take. I'm sure once some other guys get some of their opinions in and we get a little bit more colorful in this chat, but it's getting to be pretty disgusting. I'm sick of it. You guys are sick of it. What they've done to me, just in the weaponization of the judicial system against Canadian citizens just for protesting, that in itself should scare the shit out of you. Like, now, and then not even that, I'm done. I'm found guilty for a couple, if I'm not guilty for some, but now the Crown's going to appeal my case. Like, why would you're not even appealing? There's 3 murderers that just got out in Toronto because they were strip searched and held outside of their confines in the hallway while they searched their cells because they beat up a guard. And then the judge says that was torturous, conduct on behalf of the Toronto police. So we're going to stay all your charges, even though you possibly could be a murderer. No. But then the Crown's not going to appeal this kind of stuff, but you're going to appeal a mischief charge for a Canadian citizen that spoke up. That sounds like communism, man.
It is.
100%. And Matt, he said the 3 magic words: Canada, UK, and the US. Is it the empire? Let's get to you now.
Yes. Short answer, it's always the empire. We never dealt with the empire, and people often, they've been misdirected for over many generations about, like, what is the nature of empire. We kind of know it's a bad thing. But defining what it is has become muddled and by design, largely because a lot of our history books and everything have been controlled by those very forces that brought pretty much every war, that made every false flag, that got us into every war, that promoted fascism from the corridors of Wall Street and the City of London. That was never dealt with. Yeah, Hitler didn't win, sure, but those major top-down internationalist forces, those banking elites that were providing all of the support, the propaganda, the funding, the ideological conditioning, everything that allowed for the growth of fascism, including the controlled demolition of the economy in 1923 in Germany, right? Including even before that, the very World War I, that was a bankers' war that was created by ensuring that secret mutual defense pacts were set up between countries that never should have gone to war with each other. But you had secret agreements, back-channel diplomacy, secret mutual defense treaties, such that when, a City of London run adjacent terrorist cell called the Black Hand would kill some disposable archduke, you would have the activation of these treaties that would result in Serbia pulling in Russia into a conflict that it would get sucked into, with Austria pulling in the entire Austro-Hungarian, Prussian Empire into a forever a 4-year bloodbath, where you had also England, France coming up with secret treaties to back up Russia. So World War I was even today, they don't have a good reason because they don't believe in conspiracy theories, but it's only when you look at acknowledge the fact of conspiracy theories shaping history, intentions, ideas, often malevolent, that shape history, that you realize, oh, there is a reason why World War I happened. And it was exactly to get that effect. And the effect was then, the Treaty of Versailles, the so-called peace treaty that consciously destroyed what little remained of the German economy. They hyperinflated the German Reichsmark. They exactly what's happening today by design, imposing unpayable debts onto the nation, forcing them to do nothing but print money, just like today with the bailouts that were brought in 2008. And the effects are, when people finally realize what's happened, is the complete devaluation of the currency, a hard reset, and the creation of a new system. In this case, it was, the City of London affiliated Marschaft, Hitler's banker, who was brought in, trained by Montague Norman, who was brought in to provide this solution, which is the new Rentenmark, which comes with new rules of behavior that would allow people after a period of pain to allow to get the promise that maybe you can start feeding your family again. The pain can stop, but under a new set of rules that'll necessitate fascism, because nobody would democratically accept those new rules in a democratic society that required fascism to be imposed onto the people. So, I mean, in so many ways, there's these parallels, and Carney's role is largely as a creature of the system to usher in this thing that he, I mean, the guy was a Goldman Sachs investment banker, right? Before he went and became the deputy governor of the Bank of Canada in 2003. Before becoming the governor, he was an investment banker for Goldman Sachs. You know, he was somebody who helped build up this time bomb of speculative derivatives, of unpayable debts, of hollowing out the Russian economy in the 1990s. That was part of his assignment. So he created the time bomb. Then when he became the governor, his job was to then create the bail-in mechanism, working for the Bank of International Settlements, the Financial Stability Board. He actually established the foundation in 2009 of the bail-in mechanism that would allow for when a systematically too big to fail bank would fail, instead of bailing it out, all of a sudden, under his idea with Mario Draghi, all of a sudden it would become legal for those banks to just confiscate the savings of people who have their money in the bank. And now everybody becomes a co-owner of a bankrupt bank. And that was his idea that Justin Trudeau made into the bank laws, the Bank Acts in 2016. So he creates that. He creates the problem, then the solution, and at the same time pushing the entire time as the eco-warrior of central banks for a new financial architecture based around depopulation. I mean, the decarbonization of the economy, which, interestingly enough, has just taken a bit of a hit, because I think there's certain powers and principalities around the world who are not into killing their own people, who have rejected the idea of the big mass slaughter. They're going for, you know, a big chunk of the world population is instead saying they want industrial development. And it's resulted now in Mark Carney's, you know, climate compact, the financial climate compact of all the major financial institutions that he helped. Actually, he didn't help. He largely oversaw the creation of this thing in 2019. There was just a unanimous vote last week to dissolve it, to cancel the climate bankers compact, which is fascinating, demonstrating that I think that there's a certain smack of reality that a lot of the financiers that Mark Carney works for as an agent of chaos, they recognize that they cannot effectively destroy the sovereign nation state institution at this moment if they continue down their zero carbon pathway. They need to essentially destroy certain interests, which brings us into the military encirclement of Russia, the Golden Dome idea of militarily building up long-range missiles in the Canadian Arctic, which Carney has even said he's very interested in. So I think that there's a problem that the empire of the City of London has created, which involves the danger of losing control of the system that they've spent decades and generations building up for a new world order. And Carney's job is to do everything possible to make sure that that new world order is going to be preserved, even though I think that the timeline has completely changed. Their Agenda 2030 thing, it's not working out according to that timeline. And that's good in some ways, but the danger is very high. And his commitment to use Canada as we were used over a century ago as a wedge, preventing any possible emergence of a U.S.-Russian friendship on Arctic development, he made that very clear, that Canada under him will not participate in any constructive economic collaboration between Russia or the United States. He said that on record, but he has said also that he does favor militarization of the Arctic. That's a different thing. So, yeah, that's a set of bad ideas, but hopefully people can wake up in time before they allow that to run its course.
Thanks a lot, Matt. And I'm pretty sure none of us have a bank account anymore. Okay, so now we go to Wayne. I don't know if he's getting ready for war or realizes he's in a war already. But Wayne, the floor is yours.
So my analysis might differ from some of the other gentlemen here, but as I see it, my thing is I'm just a northern swamp donkey, and I have to really digest and chew things up. And that's kind of the premise of my platform. But everybody's seen The Sopranos. Everybody knows that every mob, every mafia has a cleanup guy that comes in and cleans up the mess. And where Canada finds itself in right now because of that is I agree with Matthew. The timeline is not going according to plan. And Mark Carney was brought in to finish the job to bring into control and capture fully of what is the globalist unicorn, Canada. And what we're seeing is almost all Western democratic free enterprise nations have been captured and cloned in the same mode and model as the next, with varying environmental inputs and terrain inputs. But for me, it really became clear, and this is what I think the message that I need to get across of this is, when I interviewed Michelle Gino Katsuya and Gary Clemente a couple of weeks ago, former CSIS and RCMP undercover agents, and I asked them a question that by the time I was done asking the question, I almost hoped that they wouldn't answer because the reality would be too shattering for people. But here was the question. And to my surprise, they did answer honestly. And that really had to change how I see all of the things. So my question to them was, after describing how the RCMP and CSIS and the military have effectively been neutered, a la Trudeau Sr., the reason for it is that every single institution in our country exists now solely to provide the plausible deniability and the plausibility required to maintain the continuity of the crime syndicate posing as government. And when you look at Mr. Carney himself, a shadow player for the most part, not the low-hanging face and fruit of all of these things, but you look at what he is the lube between Klaus Schwab and King Charles. So here we come into you bring the empire into this, and his brother being the chief accountant for the king. He was brought in here to bring us into alignment to maintain the continuity of the New World Order syndicate, the one world unipolar control grid. And this is where whether you like him or not, Mr. Trump is the great disruptor. And now so we see Mark Carney coming in to bring us into alignment with the EU and China, this unipolar world. And I believe that this given the understanding that it's all about plausibility and plausible deniability, I think that he's going to force this next election. He wants the budget to fail. He is going to have two boogeymen now. He's going to have Pierre Poilievre and Mr. Trump, and he is the only one with the financial acumen to lead us out of this devastating situation. So this is I think the golden unicorn of cleanup crew and desperation. This is fortifying the Alamo for the unipolar world, and that's why he's in here. And who is going to be able to argue or prove otherwise that Mr. Carney doesn't legitimately win a majority, which is required for him to complete the objectives, because they're running into too much trouble. And it's not happening fast enough. They've got the UBI bill and second reading in the Senate, Bill C8, C9, all of these things, because we've become so much more aware, much to the chagrin of the establishment. We've become very much more aware of what is going on here, that we're kind of forcing this situation to skip ahead. They're knee-jerking, overreacting, and they're going to place Carney plausibly into the position of ultimate control in Canada. So I believe that is the why, to bring Canada to heel under full control of the unipolar, in perfect alignment with the EU and the World Economic Forum and the United Nations. So that's my thoughts on the why.
That's a fantastic breakdown, and I'm afraid to ask, Dan, because 2 years ago or so you were on my show and you were warning about Carney, and then you just wrote that article, and you were right. It's your second highest Substack yet, so what's going on as well. Let's go ahead and break it down for us, Dan.
Yeah, I just want to follow up a couple of things, or one quick thing that Pat said regarding the Bilderberg. You know, he was on the steering committee of Bilderberg up until January of this year, and some people tend to forget
Absolutely correct. And they buried his credentials so you couldn't see it. And that was what the whole 106 days of Pro Rogue was for, was to bury his. Sorry to interrupt, but yeah.
It's okay. Yeah, absolutely.
Dan, are you playing with a pen or something? There's a sound coming from your side.
Oh, maybe it's my watch. Hold on, I just put my watch off here so it doesn't click on the thing there.
Much better, thank you.
Sorry about that. All right, a couple of things. So we have to know that Carney. A couple of things I want to mention right off the bat is obviously, I mean, Carney is a globalist bankster, right? He's a servant for the City of London / Oxford satanic banking cabal, just to put it mildly, right? And the other thing I would just say to Nico, because we started this podcast with why is Mark Carney destroying the relationship with the U.S.? I think that's a petty, that's just a petty, it's noise, okay? It's not the bigger picture. That's a distraction. That's a magic trick, is to distract you to go there, okay? What's the real issue? Okay, gentlemen, I'm frustrated. Very frustrated because everyone, including the alternative media, they're focused on the symptoms and noise rather than the disease or root cause of who is destroying us, which is the international banking cabal headed by the BIS, the Fed, and the collusion of the Bank of Canada, who, of course, Mark Carney used to be the governor for the Bank of Canada, and all the other member central banks. And most Canadians, including our politicians, still don't know that since 1974, we stopped borrowing interest-free. And the governor of the Bank of Canada goes to bi-monthly meetings at the BIS in Switzerland. The contents of these meetings, which includes banking, monetary policies, are kept completely secret. Even our members of parliament are not allowed to know their contents. Yet every 2 months, our Bank of Governor, in this case, Tiff Macklin, who also happens to be the chair of the group of governors and heads of supervision at the BIS, that's the oversight body for the very powerful Basel Committee. And that's the committee that was created in 1974, thanks to Papa Trudeau also, right? People tend to forget that. So they basically implement these destructive monetary policies, which have been exploding our annual deficits, $1 trillion debt, with its associated yearly servicing cost of over $46 billion. So the criminals posing as our government representatives and our current PM, who is front and center to this banking cabal, use this dirty printed money to implement all of their globalist aligned plans, climate scam, you name it. And none of these nefarious agendas, bills, laws, C2, C9, C11, C63, all this madness will never stop until this head of snake is cut off, period, full stop. That's my opening statement.
Bravo, my friend. And I like how you brought us back to the original question, which is, why is he doing this with Trump? And I love how you pulled out a rabbit, because you go down those rabbit holes and you said, look, it's just a magic trick. There's a bigger issue here. 100%. And I do think this is exactly what we're seeing here. In the corporate world, one thing that you can do if you want the assets of a company is you buy a company using debt. And then when it can't service the debt and it bankrupts, you can then have access to the assets, sell it off, break it up, make it more valuable to you as the person who came in there to pillage it. And now we're just seeing a super scale of this. This is something they've been doing to companies for a long time now, if you're paying attention. They buy the company, use debt, then the company service the debt, bankrupts, bada boom, bada bing. You can break it up and take all the pieces you want.
And who's the best one at that right now? Who's famous for doing that? Donald J. Trump.
Trump and all his banker buddies. This is their system that they've been doing for quite some time. And Carney is also one of the shadow makers in the back doing this, kind of guiding them on how to do all of this as well. So, and we've seen this, and there's a whole bunch of U.S. administration that gets into this kind of thing. Kerry is one of the ones that comes to mind right now as well. He used to do that a lot too. Asset buying, bankrupt, break it down. But now we're seeing it super scaled. This is now country level. Take a close look at what happened to Greece. Greece got involved with the IMF. The IMF took over and controlled basically Greece for many, many years. High interest wasn't the reason they were in there. It was to control the assets, control the people, and basically do a test case scenario, in my mind, a pilot project on what can happen globally and how you do this. And now Canada is on that hit list. It's the very next one. Carney coming back was because Trudeau Jr. couldn't get the job done. He just failed. He was too interested in maybe other extracurricular activities to get the job done. So Carney came back to finish it up. And he is absolutely a danger. Dan and many others have brought it to my attention over the years. And I was definitely afraid when I heard he was moving to Canada. I'm like, oh no, we're done. And then when he announced that he was going to become the Liberal leader, he was selected. There was no election. $350,000 to get in there. Two top candidates, all of a sudden they were disqualified. There were inside the Liberal Party, I think it was like 180,000 or maybe more votes that didn't count. And it was all pre-planned, 100% pre-planned. Because the very first day he got in there, he started to do some banking reform and started to create that loonie dollar system, which is similar to the euro dollar system. March 12th is when he sent out a letter. And we had Brett Olin from Bow Valley Credit Union blow the whistle on that they were already trying to do a currency war with the U.S. So before the election, he was poking the bear and trying to cause problems. So I am not surprised to hear this panel talk about things like Hitler at the 12-minute mark. And now we're talking about the devil and other things already, because this is definitely the vein that I think Carney is in. And I do agree with Dan on this one, Nico. It's just a smokescreen. This is the World Series of geopolitical stuff, the fight with Trump. The big guns are in the back waiting for us to be distracted to take over. Back to you, buddy.
I agree completely. I agree with pretty much everything that everybody said on this panel, but I want to ask you guys a question, because one of the things I've noticed after creating so much content, and especially trying to convince people that are not conspiracy theorists to believe my conspiracy theories, or at least consider them, is that I can't go the route that Dan is using. It's too big of a pill to swallow for the average individual out there to believe that it is that evil what's going on behind closed doors, going from, oh shit, I think something was wrong during COVID times, to there's a cabal of bankers that have been planning for decades to take over the world. That's a hard pill to swallow. So I tend to use kind of smaller pieces of information to try to open their ears to at least consider it, so then they can start doing their own research. Because at the end of the day, you never convince anybody of anything. You just open the door so that they can convince themselves that they were right, because they don't want to be proven wrong. So you just help them prove themselves right. One of the questions I have for you guys, and this is going to piss off a lot of people, because, you know, that's what I do, bro. I ask questions that piss people off, so that's kind of what I do. But one of the things that really bothers me, or one thing that needs to be addressed, is a lot of conservative, and when I say conservative, I talk big C conservative, not real conservatives of Canada, think that Pierre Poilievre is here to save us as Canadians. Can we, can you, do you guys... yeah, Mr. that never stood up for anything in his life is now here to save us. But the question I have for you guys is Pierre Poilievre controlled opposition to make it appear like we do have an opposition, that Mark Carney and Justin Trudeau wasn't running by themselves, that there is some type, we have hope in Pierre Poilievre? Is it all part of the illusion?
Pat?
Well, it's obviously, we can say this about the whole system. Our governing system right now in Canada is, you can go liberal and you can go conservative. It's two wings of the bird. We hear that expression a lot. Our governing system in Canada is designed around a system that was almost 200, 300 years old. Today is the population of today, and the way we think and do things is different. So the only way you're going to have Pierre even be the savior you want him to be to save the day, you would need a 100% electoral reform within our system, within our governing system. You're never going to get there. They will not hand over the torch that easy. But you know, Pierre's good with the one-liners. I think, in my mind, I'm not going to give him the benefit of the doubt, or I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. I think he knows enough, but he still panders, right? He still panders to the wrong crowd. He should be talking to the crowd that's the 10 million that don't believe in this stuff. And it just takes one politician, but they're never going to oust that the system's broken. They're never going to. They still have this faith in that the system can be fixed. But it can't, and it needs to be overhauled big time in Canada. But I don't think Pierre has it in him. I think Pierre will go back to the same conservative push, the same conservative one-liners, the same, same tactics. But I can say this much, that under Stephen Harper, in this, whatever you want to call it, even if you believe de facto government already bullshit, which is true, at the same time, under Harper and under the conservative government, Canada really did prosper. We really did really good on our trade and our oil and gas industry. I know I worked 12 years straight, never had a day off almost. Like, our oil and gas industry was booming for a long time. And I think they made some very serious business maneuvers until you start digging in after and you find out that this agreement with China and the $42 billion infrastructure project that should have been in the hands of Canadians went to a Chinese government right after Trudeau took over as prime minister in the very early onsets. So I think all this foundation is laid out already. Like I believe it was Dan that said it. It's already designed. They're already here. They're already making their moves. They're just giving us that fake illusion that we have some kind of say in what we're doing. But I don't think we have a say in anything. I think the only way we're going to fix it is ourselves. I'm not going to put my faith in any leader, any politician. I think they're all liars. I think they all just, they play the dance so that the other guys make more money off us.
So, Matt, can we vote our way out of this one? What do you think?
Yeah, no. If we were like a legitimate country with a cultured people that were relatively well informed, there's the typical democratic voting process would play a much more vigorous, potent role. But unfortunately, I don't see Canada as anything more than a synthetic construct with some aspects of democracy, but very little influence that those aspects tend to have that involve like officials who are brought into power and held accountable by the citizens. Instead, I think that the vast majority, far more than people realize, of the big decisions policy-wise top down come from unelected, and always have since 1867 and even before that, from unelected channels, from things like the Privy Council office, not just the Privy Council, but the Privy Council office, the lieutenant governors, the entire deep state structure, the deputy governor, the deputy governors. So much of Canada's civil service is it's a deep state swamp by design, run ideologically by forces that have no concern or care for Canada or Canadians. It's something very different. It's supranational in its core, as it always has been, and even as our great founding father John A. Macdonald, Sir John, even said, "A Britisher I was born, and a Britisher I will die." And this is like the George Washington of Canada, who said such a thing. So it's not a question of, I think, voting this thing out. There's no real choices that are being provided. I mean, Poilievre, the guy's a joke. He's a bit of a pressure valve. That's how I think of him, as a pressure valve. He will dance to the tune of whoever is giving him a script, and at a certain point it became more expedient to take on a certain language that accommodated the angry mob that was clearly on the verge of doing something that was troublesome to his handlers. And so he started adopting a slightly more anti-Great Reset language, but only in words. There was nothing in policy or action that was going to back it up. So he that placated and satisfied some very angry conservatives, but foolishly so, because again, there was never anything behind it. So I think that there's a big learning curve that a lot of Canadians have to go through fast. COVID helped to shake them up from a lot of their dreamlike delusions about the way they thought reality in Canada was wired. But there's still a long ways to go to finally like properly appreciate what is the nature of the terrain. Carney is, like I said, he's a very, very, unlike Trudeau, he's a much more efficient, competent technocrat. The guy is pushing something very evil, but unlike Justin, who was a bubblehead idiot, wind-up doll, the guy couldn't be trusted to be in a room with a Vladimir Putin or a Xi Jinping or a Trump. Like, the guy was a mess. He was totally full of himself, as pure ego with nothing internal going on. I would say Carney has a lot more in common psychologically as a profile to Pierre Elliott Trudeau, if anything, who is, again, a very dangerous Fabian Society technocrat, extremely well Jesuit educated. There's a certain intellectual rigor. But as such, he's that much more dangerous because of his type of competency and ideological drive. As is his wife, Diana Carney, who's a major force as well, and an often underappreciated force, managing things like the Canada 2020 think tank that put Justin Trudeau into power, that was created by a bunch of privy councillors back in 2004, which exerts way more influence. This is what interfaced with the entire Obama behaviorist nexus as Obama was brought in to replace George Bush. And all of these behaviorists were like doing a little bit of a revolving door, coming into Ottawa with Al Gore and Larry Summers and Peter Orszag and Obama and company being brought in and back and forth. But there's this intersection of this thing. And Diana Carney is, I think the president of research for that thing. And these guys are they're so enmeshed in the structures of this monstrosity that I think people really do need to get a better sense of that and look at the fact that they can't think that there's any solutions that are going to come from Canada per se. Like the problems facing Canada come from being part of a global system. And I agree with you, Nico, that it's difficult to just say that to your average person who's woken up just like 2 seconds ago. That's not going to cut it. But I mean, I'm speaking to you guys as people who've done their work, have a foundation. And I'm assuming people watching this show, if you're watching this show, it's because you've made your own discoveries, you've got a foundation. But I mean, the problems it's a systemic problem internationally, historically. And so people have to think on a much bigger level than they're used to. And then see that, okay, this oligarchy that brought in, as I said in my opening remarks, that made World War I, that made World War II, that created all the false flags, the sinking of the Maine in 1898, the false flag, the Operation Northwoods proposal to shoot down civilian aircraft as an excuse to go into Cuba, or the actual, Gulf of Tonkin incident that brought us into Vietnam, or the Reichstag fire, another false flag that created the dictatorship and the enabling act of Hitler, and all of the economic, shenanigans that allowed for the capturing and the dismantling of nation states and the destruction of our culture over generations. All of that thing was pushed by an oligarchy that has fears. The oligarchy has insecurities. There's certain things that have been done from time to time which have reduced the power of that oligarchy, which goes back to the higher, inbred families that were managing the Roman Empire. They didn't go away. They were never punished. They're still there under different forms, but they're still there. But there's been certain things historically that we can learn from that has reduced their power and influence, and that has increased the freedom of people over time. That has stopped New World Order attempts from happening, because there's been other attempts not that long ago to enforce New World Order end games, and smarter people were able to not fall for those traps. So if we look to those things that make our enemies afraid, we should do more of that. So that's sort of my message that I try to that's my wheelhorse. I try to hammer at as much as I can, and appreciate that you guys are doing that too. So that's all I could say.
Thanks.
One of the things I just sorry to interrupt. I want to kind of interject on that, and of course, right, Nico, we say whatever we feel like we're saying, and then and we'll deal with the repercussions after.
100,000,000,000%. Fuck yes.
So some of the things I want to bring up, and I'm just gonna say, somebody decided that they were gonna be proactive and translate a lot of a certain somebody's speeches of what was said back at a certain time frame. And if you've heard them, and if you're kind of reading between the lines of what I'm talking about, some of those speeches were starting to sound a lot of like what we are discussing today and what we are going through today, and the demasculinating of our men, the infiltration within our judicial systems, our education systems, the infiltration within our, and from everybody. Like we see it here in Canada, there's specific, it almost looks like strategic voting of specific people into positions to basically demoralize or degrade our culture, our way of the way we do things in Canada. And they're starting to see every day on a daily basis how the mob is being molded and being defragmented so that they can put it back in the piece in the way that they want it, because there are certain people that take control a lot easier. And that's why, hard stock, old stock Canadians are being driven out more and more, and that we are being looked at as a more danger to our own country than the people that are coming into our own country. But yet we see inside our institutions that our country is being changed to mold to a different, like I see it. And I'll bring an example is in my case, there was a bunch of people from Palestine that were charged with the same charges, that did the same thing. In fact, they used my bail conditions to get them out of jail. So they had the same bail conditions I had because it was R.V. King for their bail hearing. Then when they got to trial, they were charged with the same thing: intimidating law enforcement, counseling to intimidate, mischief, counseling to mischief, because they invoked this protest. And these guys actually created damage. They yelled and shouted death to cops, and they were going to, from the river to the sea kind of stuff. And the same Crown attorney that is not of Canadian descent decided he's going to give these guys, all they had to do was write a letter saying how they'll protest appropriately next time. And they dropped all the charges. This was less than 12 days after I was found guilty of 1 year in jail for protesting peacefully. And in fact, being told I was a formidable component as to the protest being peaceful, nonviolent, and no damage to property. I get a year in jail. These guys write a letter to say that, you're not, you don't do this and you'll be okay. You're not going to get into trouble. You're not going to get any charges. Sorry, my computer's falling. So I see, and I've watched meetings in the United Nations Council, not personally, but on TV, of specific leaders stating that they are going to infiltrate, they are going to flood our borders, they are going to take over our governmental systems, our educational systems, and we're not going to beat you from within. We're not going to beat you from with bombs, bullets, all that kind of stuff. We're gonna beat you from within. And I've seen more and more videos. They're going to take over but that's all by design. So you've got big companies big, and I say companies because corporation companies, countries that are involved with this. And there's two playing back to back, and it's China and the Saudi Arabians. And they are very formidable on the United Nations agenda and pushing for the destabilization of our Western democracies and implementing these people into positions in our government in order to eventually manipulate our laws and change it to fit their narrative. You're seeing it in England, right? They're taking over the regime that is the crown, but the crown still holds weight, but yet the crown is allowing their own people to be manipulated and changed over. How does that, I guess that's a question I have, is how is that even possible in a monarchy supposedly that they have in England? And England is allowing them to come in and destroy their country. And we're doing it here. Australia's having the same issues. And it's these empire-like countries that are being directed from two major players on the United Nations board, and that is Saudi Arabia and China, that are buying up all the assets, taking us at the lowest dollar, and eventually going to hand us over to their highest bidder. And it's they did it to Greece, they did it to Rome, they did it to all these societies all over the years, and it's just playing again and then again and again. But eventually, in every revolution, in every society, the peasants do stand up.
Are you saying that? Are you saying that China and Saudi Arabia are behind all of our problems?
I think that there's a big manipulation, and they're the money, so they're buying up all the assets by being pushed by another. There's the whole dark cabal in the background. You've got the Grey Pope. You've got all of these different secret societies that are They're all playing a game, but using
Well,
the
let-
money of these other countries.
Well, let's get back into the destruction in a second because I want to go to Wayne and then Dan. Because you're not wrong. Look, Pat got a year for honking horns, and the Supreme Court 5-4 just said you can't even get a year for child exploitative.
Insane.
So we have a really weird system now, Pat. You're absolutely right. They're destroying it, demoralizing us, and taking away our morals as well. Wayne, is Pierre the type of guy that's going to win this battle for us?
I'm glad. I want to circle back to this because the original question was: is Pierre controlled opposition, and can we vote our way out of this? And I come from the George Carlin school of diplomacy. If voting mattered, they wouldn't let us do it. Right. And now keep that in mind. So what we have to realize is these empires have been around for a long time. And what we get to dabble in is cheering on the red knight, the blue knight, the purple knight, the green knight, and the orange knight at a jousting competition as to who gets to be the next asset manager for the crown. And we are nothing more than line items on the crown's asset sheet. Right. So will Pierre, not a snowball's hope in Hades, can that happen? Right? So we have to realize that we cannot vote our way out of this shit. The only cure for 1984 is 1776. But to touch on everything is always about si bono, follow the money. And if you look at who's pulling the strings of all of this, the OIC, which is the largest single voting bloc in the United Nations, which is funded by Qatar, which is leveraging the United Nations through policy, and all of these guys in between, the Pierres, the Justin Trudeaus, the Mark Carneys, they are nothing more than middle managers. When they needed a pop star, they had Justin Trudeau. When they needed somebody that was a little bit more serious, they bring in Mark Carney. When they want to make us feel like we're in the game, they might give Pierre a minority in it. So at this point, I don't see any political solution in any of this. And by keeping the conversation stuck in politics, all we do is perpetuate the suffering because there is no solution within it. So that's my George Carlin take on it all.
It's a big club and we're not in it, right, Wayne? And George Carlin had a lot of things that was very, very wise. I wish he was around now. I wonder what he would say now. Dan, what do you think about Polyev? Is he going to save us? Can we vote our way out of this? Or is Carlin really the last wisdom that we had in this world?
Okay, I think enough has been said about Polyev. So what I'd rather say here is that all of these MPs, okay, they don't work for or represent the citizens of Canada, okay? They represent globalist interests. I'll just give two illustrative examples, okay? One current and one that from, let's say, the past couple years, okay? We'll start with the second, supposedly maybe or arguably the most important or person in the Conservative Party, Leslyn Lewis. Oh, wait, isn't she a champion for, a kind of going against the WHO or the World Economic Forum? Oh, yeah. Oh, she's, to me, like, these are all actors on the stage, okay? Each playing their respective specific roles, okay, for the globalist agendas, okay? And why do I bring up Leslyn Lewis, okay? What's her role? Oh, her role is good cop, right? Okay. Oh, the WEF is bad, right? Oh, but does she ever talk about on her Substack how she's actually on the advisory board of the Alliance for Responsible Citizenship, also known as ARC? Jordan Peterson is on that board as well, and you can go look up that board. There's a big who's who on that board, and that organization is basically it's founded by billionaires. So it's the kind of like a more like almost church friendly version of the WEF. Okay, so she's playing a role. Okay, now I'll give you a more recent example. Okay, you guys there's been a lot of discussion about these bills C2, C9, and so forth. Okay, so if we look first at the bill C9, right? Combating Hate Act. Who wrote this bill? Oh, it's the Minister of Justice, Sean Fraser. Okay. So if you want to learn anything about somebody, learn about where they studied, especially if they studied abroad. My most viewed article on Substack is about the Great Climate Scam and actually how that was, believe it or not, initiated by Papa Trudeau, okay, and his right-hand man, Maurice Strong. Well, where did Papa Trudeau study? Okay, you have to go, I go through all of that in my article. So if people want to take a look at that, take a look at that. Because who are their professors? How were they influenced by their professors? Matt talked about the Fabian Society. They're deep into all of that. So let's just take a look a little bit about the background of Sean Fraser. Where did he study law? Okay, he did a master's degree in public international law from Leiden. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Leiden University, that's in the Netherlands, okay, in international law and legal studies program. His LinkedIn profile reinforces his Leiden specialization, which is in public international law. Okay, so let's look at a few professors, for example, from there, and look at their background. So these are possible influences, right? One was Jan Art Schulte, or Schulte. I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce that. Okay, so this professor did a lot of research. It focuses on governing a globalized world, including global economic governance and internet governance. Wonder what's going on with the internet these days. This is a professor that aligns a lot with globalist orientations. Another one, just two quick ones, very, very quickly. Giles Scott Smith, okay. Highly explorative in the transatlantic networks. Okay, so that should say a lot. One more professor, Horst Fischer, Professor Emeritus at Leiden. Okay, he previously worked with the United Nations, the European Union. Okay, so he's highly, this is highly indicative of a globalist UN-oriented kind of stance. Okay, there's some other ones, but I want to keep it short. If you go to the Honorable Sean Fraser's Government of Canada, rightoncanada.ca website. Okay, he's a long time, I'll just read right from that page. He's a long time volunteer, having served as vice president of a local branch of the United Nations Association in Canada, acted as a research fellow with the Center for International Sustainable Development Law. Are we starting to see a pattern here, folks? Yep. Okay. So, yeah, I mean, just look at the law, right? C9, hate speech, globalist agenda, sustainable, they're all playing their roles. Okay. I think if Canadians don't see this by now, like, I don't know what's going to wake them up. So, anyway, a couple examples for my personal rant there, but.
Thanks a lot, Dan. And holy smokes. Yes, go back to the education, see who they studied under. You'll see a lot of connections. And it is kind of scary when you actually dig around and follow those dots and make those lines. There's a very small world. That's what George Carlin said, right? I want to kind of just jump onto the Pierre thing for a little bit, because, of course, I want to get a lot more hate online, because anytime I talk about Pierre, this is exactly how I get hate. I get called a whole bunch of names. In fact, I get beat by the right more than the left when it comes to when I have criticisms. And I'm sure there's a comment or two that's saying, hey, why is this a Poilievre beat a Poilievre conversation now suddenly? It's because we need to pay attention to stuff like this. I knew we were in trouble when he started to pander right with his looks. He got rid of his glasses, tried to beef up, tried to be more of a tough guy. And at one point, he was looking at a supermajority. He actually had Canada in the palm of his hands. He had the potential, a path forward to become the leader of Canada. And he blew it. Or did he? I actually don't think he blew it. I think he took a knee. I think he was offered something. Maybe the next prime ministership. This is one big bird, and they're both part of the same thing. Carney came in, kneecapped him right away, got rid of the carbon conversation, tricked Canadians into believing he got rid of it when he just dropped it to zero, and brought Trump to the table, and they both had the exact same conversation throughout running for the election. In fact, the National Post even put out an article that said they're indistinguishable. These two guys, they sound exactly the same. And I think he absolutely blew it. He didn't pivot. He didn't work hard. He pandered to the wrong group and then lost them as soon as Carney hit the stage, because it looked like he was trying to scoop up Trudeau support. And as soon as Trudeau was gone, Carney came in. Pierre lost all of that. Now, whether he was too weak to go ahead and pivot and make sure that he had a stronger campaign, or he did take a knee, in either case, he failed so bad, he lost his own seat. And then he came out to Alberta to pick up a seat, a very easy win. There was absolutely no way Alberta was going to send anybody but a blue in, because not only are we very conservative, we're so afraid of the alternative that we will just vote blue no matter who. And that's exactly what we saw happen with Pierre. And then Pierre went back east. He's now back in Ontario doing whatever he wants. In fact, he wanted to do a big event. He did it in Toronto. And Nico, all I said online was, why doesn't Pierre do some of these events here in Alberta where he was elected in? And holy smokes, I was getting attacked just for pointing that out. And even one person said, you exclusively attack Pierre and nobody else. What a moron. Go through my post. I attack everybody that I think needs some attention and we need to hold accountable. And when I see Pierre and his support, it does feel and sound like a cult. There's a lot of people that will just follow him to the ends of the earth like he's got a flute and he's walking through town. And nobody knows why they're following him, but they are. So I'm very, very concerned that if people think he's a savior, not only are they going to be disappointed, they're going to be part of the problem, because they're going to be so damn asleep on what's actually going on. They're not going to stand up. They're just going to sit on the sideline like they're watching the Blue Jays game, just cheer from time to time, but do nothing to help and advance Canada. In fact, what they'll end up doing is coming after people like this panel here and attack us just for saying something that isn't flattering but very true about Pierre. And Nico, I know you've gone through this yourself as well.
If I can throw something in here on this, there is the fastest way on earth to trigger a conservative full of hopium is take a screenshot of Pierre Poilievre's signature on the Migration Compact and the Paris Agreement, and they will stop at no lengths to try and destroy you because you're stealing their hopium. They're looking for the easy button, the solution, the Marvel comic book superhero that doesn't exist, and it's the intellectual dishonesty that is destroying our country more than anything else when it comes to that.
Agreed. Nico?
You're not doing it right if the left and the right is not hating you equally. You're definitely not doing something right, because I gotta say I get more hate from the right than I do from the left. But as I'm listening to you guys talk, I got a question for you guys, because this is something I bring up all the time, and I've talked about this before many times on my show, where Pierre Poilievre followers sound like Trump followers in the U.S. Like they sound like MAGA. No matter what Trump will do, we're gonna defend him, right? That's what the cult is. In Canada, we have the Pierre Poilievre cult and we have the Mark Carney cult. But the question I have for you guys, because Pierre Poilievre is not backed by any mainstream media like the CBC, for example, like the propaganda arm of the Liberal Party. But one thing that I keep on noticing is that he is starting to have big content creators pushing him through their audience. And I'm talking about people that I've had conversations with to have
Mario Zelaya. I interviewed him. Mario Zelaya is a PP. He's a PP pusher.
Well, the thing is that I had relationship with most of those content creators until the last election. Until I started talking about how Pierre Poilievre's just a bitch. He's not a leader by any stretch of the imagination. He's never stood up for anything in his life. He's a career politician that is very happy to be the opposition leader. He doesn't want to be prime minister. He just wants a very comfortable seat looking like controlled opposition. To me, that is all Pierre Poilievre is. But the question I have for you guys is, because a lot of those people don't talk to me anymore, surprisingly, since I've been calling out Pierre Poilievre basically every day. Are they controlled? Are those people, the content creators, and I'm not going to name names, I'm not here to start shit with those people. They know who they are, and I know they watch my stuff, so they know who I'm talking about. And if you feel targeted by my comment, fuck yes, I'm talking about you. But there is about 5 people in Canada that have grew exponentially over the past 10 months, and I don't believe this for a second that it was organic. Are those people part of the controlled opposition that is Pierre Poilievre, or are they just regular people that are liberals and really believe that the Conservative Party of Canada can save them?
Pat, it's all yours.
Well, I might say something that might trigger some people in here, but I think I'm in the right crowd that, you know, the ADL has been in control of a lot of online rhetoric that can and can't be said on airwaves. And I put together a piece a few weeks back where Benjamin Netanyahu is sitting across the table from a lot of content creators in the United States and explaining how they're going to take over social airways and how they're going to weaponize social media against people to make sure that they think a certain way and talk a certain way and keep propping this machine up, and how they're going to do it. There is absolutely, without a doubt, that exact same thing happening in Canada, and I know firsthand, and that's during the COVID era. They were paying people to speak a certain language during the time to fear porn the citizens, and they were influencers, and they are doing the same thing to sway the minds of people when it comes to politics. It's an old school tactic. Like I said to Mario Zelaya, and he's one that comes to mind. When I talked to him and I did an interview with him, I said, who pissed you off so much that got you this position that you can put Pierre up on a pedestal so much? And he couldn't answer it. And to that right there raised my suspicion. And I watch only content that props Poilievre up and never looks at it from, you know, an outside perspective and sees maybe something's afoot here. And then, oh, now you're surprised you're at a dinner with them. You just happen to be at dinner with Pierre Poilievre, and you just happen to show up and you had a great chat with this guy. I believe 100% these people that you're speaking of, Nico, are paid and pushed by lobbyists that have money, and I've also uncovered thousands of politicians over the years who have been flown to private meetings with a certain Zionist regime that is giving them their marching orders. And many of our politicians, I put this one out as well, thousands of flights over to Israel to learn and push that kind of ideology that's coming out of that end of things. So here in Canada, you're absolutely right that this is happening, and I don't think you could prove me wrong on this one. I think if the right person does some digging, you're going to find that every one of these Canadian influencers that have these large mass followings that are pushing this certain specific agendas and the specific politicians, they're all got some money in their pocket from somebody.
Well, there we go, Nico. We had Zionist and nobody dropped off. So fantastic. We'll keep going with this particular episode because, Matt, propaganda, is it used? Of course. And do you think this is happening in Canada? And I have some suspicions. I know some of these people too. I saw what happened as I ran for the PPC in the election. And then boom, friends turned into foe. And then after the election, they want to be friends again. Does this happen? And do you think people are being paid?
Yeah. Yes. I mean,
yes. I just love how you bring it in. Yeah.
The short answer, right? Well, I mean, for the more nuanced answer, I guess the thing I've tended to observe is that disinformation operatives tend to be of two sort of categories. You've got those who are self-aware of what they are and those who are unconscious of what they are. I'd say the first category is smaller, much more influential, much more causal. And it's easy to sort of like label everybody as part of the psyop, or, you know, to a certain degree, a lot of people are, but they're against their own desires. You know, they're going along with what they think is the best thing to do based on the information they're getting. They start getting calls from sources they trust, providing them information, insider information, and they go with it. Or they're getting little incentives that they think are innocent enough to maybe go to this seminar, to get this briefing, to be, you know, to maybe go to a trip to some place in the Middle East and go through a workshop or two. And it seems all innocent, and they don't realize that their mind, the way that they're perceiving reality is being sculpted with messaging that is making them an instrument of ultimately the enslavement of the people that they think that they're actually helping. So there's those kinds that I think are the majority of the unaware misinformation influencers. And I generally refrain from labeling, from passing judgment, although I will if I'm really certain. And I know that there are a handful of influencers who I'm quite certain are very, very knowledgeable of what they are. Majority I don't think are. But I would say this, like, there's certain patterns that I'm seeing right now based on my work as a historian. I'm seeing certain patterns reemerge, certain formulas for population control and perception management that have worked very effectively to get certain results in the past, and the same results are being gamed at yet again today. For example, the radical Bolsheviks. I'm about to release a book for Christmas called "Why Real Patriots Don't Think Like Hitler." It's called "Why Real Patriots Don't Think Like Hitler." It's a good name because it's obviously we're seeing a certain revivalist revisionism going on right now. And what I would say, people have heard me mention that the Wall Street and London bankers that were actually the thing behind the rise of fascism, which came about as a solution to a desperate population that was broken down after World War I, after the suffering, the controlled demolition of their economies. And the idea was, well, the miracle economic solution is fascism to get your dignity back. But those same bankers were also funding radical Bolshevism. So the radical Bolshevik movement of Trotsky, of the sex education, the basically proto-pedophilia operations in the Hungarian Bolshevik government of 1918 under Georg Lukács, were all being provided money and support by those same bankers who are playing both sides, left and right. So I think the populations of the world have been managed by left-right dynamics from the French Revolution, where you had the emotional Jacobins who were turned into a weaponized mob of proto-Bolsheviks that overturned the entire established order and turned the potential of a real French Revolution into a bloodbath where everyone was getting their heads lopped off. And as a reaction, you had a Girondin reaction of the logical, elite that tried to impose order onto the anarchy of the emotional chaos of the mob. Both sides were taking turns lopping each other's heads off. Both sides were pushing two different kinds of tyranny, one a little bit more rigidly fascist as a reaction to the left fascism, but as a result was civil war, effectively, a total civil war and a bloodbath, a terror on both sides, and a pagan revival on both sides, and then ultimately a Napoleon hard fascist that was trying to bring about a new Jerusalem to bring back the Jews into the Middle East, as Napoleon called himself the protector of the Jews, and had the idea of après moi le déluge, after me the flood. He saw himself as the Messiah that would bring in a new age, a new 1,000-year Reich, with the recovery of the Holy Land and the building up of the Third Temple. So Napoleon had that. He was being funded by the same bankers, though, that did the problem reaction solution. We did the same thing with Trotsky and the figures who were pushing the Nazi Party and the Italian fascists and the French fascists and the American fascists that were also pushing the same thing. Around Henry Ford, who was financing that. A lot of the Wall Street bankers were also funding the American Fascist Party that were exposing the international Jewry as the useful scapegoat. So I do see Zionism as being something that's done a lot of evil. It's bringing us into a very bad place in many ways. But there's also, I think, a disposability to those who are useful idiots bringing about this cataclysmic situation, which are ultimately sacrificial to a higher agenda. So that's something that I'm seeing repeat, and it's a concern that I have right now that we're falling for a trap that got us into a lot of problems in the past.
So I have
we'll get to that in a second. I just want to get to the next two you are coming up right away. Okay. I'm going to go to Wayne next. So Wayne, look, somebody pays for the Kool-Aid, somebody makes the Kool-Aid, and a bunch of people drink it. It seems like you feel the same way. That maybe there's some influencers out there that know what they're doing, and then a bunch of people that just follow along.
I want to expand on what Matthew said there a little bit, and I think that a large part of it is the witting and the unwitting, but then you have to add into the mix the business model types, right? And if you look back at Steven Crowder, refusing all of that money from the Daily Wire, it's because of the rule sets, right? So if you are successful on YouTube, you are playing within the fence posts, within the goalposts. And if you stick to nothing more than an approved political guideline to continue to perpetuate and provide both sides of the plausibility and plausible deniability for the crime syndicates, you're going to be allowed to be successful. But we're also seeing an invasion of the the quote unquote alternative media space by people that have been rejected in the mercenary media space, and a massive business model. And I mean, who didn't want to be a YouTube influencer and get those shiny plaques and all of those bucks, right? So this is a comfortable business model for those who are willing, they may not be actively malignant in their agenda, but we're living in a me society, and people, if they can get their likes and their clicks and their views and get their paycheck, they're going to say whatever is comfortable to say, whether they believe it or not, or even if they do believe it, they're going to stick to a system, to a discussion that they are comfortable with, i.e. nothing but straight up politics. They're not going to get into chasing the money. They're not going to get into the investigative exposure, whistleblowing type of stuff. And I think that that's a really big, filter to kind of gauge the authenticity of the folks that are bringing you whatever it is that they want you to believe. And, there are a lot of people making a lot of perks from going out there and being soothing online, providing the warm, fuzzy blankets and the hot cocos and making people feel better at night about going to bed, when they know in their heart of hearts genuinely that it's fluff. And people we're living with a severely demoralized, traumatized society. Great many of them have the deer in the headlights mindset. They don't know fight or flight. They're paralyzed, and whatever makes them feel good at night, that's kind of the direction that they're going to go. So I don't think it's just so much as controlled or uncontrolled opposition. I think it's unwitting, witting, and business models.
Okay, so Dan can actually speak to that, because he just left X, because X was not just shadow banning him, but getting very toxic and going after him and trying to destroy him as well. So if you don't play along, then they come and destroy you. And if you haven't had X or YouTube or Facebook jail you yet, you are playing within the community guidelines. And that's another way to control and guide the conversation, is to put those goalposts up, like you're saying there, Wayne. And people play within it because they want that monetization. Dan, you had to leave, and you ended up on Substack, which is a Mark Carney affiliated organization. So what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, that just reminds me, because actually I'm going to have a guest on my podcast I'm recording Monday who did a lot of analyses on the shenanigans going on Substack, because I am shadow banned, he is shadow banned, and a lot of us are shadow banned, and we're going to explore that as well. And if you recall, this is related to what I'm going to talk about too. Is I was on a panel on your show, Jason, with Dr. Robert Malone, where we talked about 5th generation warfare, and that was at the time when Stripe was trying to basically ask him for all his like business records and all that. And if you recall in that conversation, I told him, oh, well, guess who's on the board of Stripe? At that time, it was Mark Carney, right? He didn't know that. Anyway, long story short, he lawyered up and he was able to, not get booted off. And he's obviously one of the top Substackers, but that's just a parenthèse, as we say in French. But yeah, before I do answer the specific question, Nico's specific questions about who may be behind all these like online kind of boosting of like these whatever influencers, I want to follow up again on Pat. Pat mentioned the ADL, right? And I think that's a very, very important point, because there's one thing, there's 2 points I want to make here. Number one is, wasn't there news recently that some influencers were paid up to $7,000 for their post by net?
Well, that's kind of what I have queued up. So I have a video that it's queued up.
Okay,
I want to
hold that thought.
Yeah, we'll get there. Yeah.
Hold that thought. So when I was on X, actually this summer, I had a 20 part tweet, a thread on X. I'll just refer to the first one. I say one of 20 regarding the Epstein files. The problem is the FBI/DOJ is the same blackmail network that we are insisting the FBI/DOJ expose. Wake up, folks. The FBI has been infiltrated by the Israel's ADL from its very inception. You can look at the history of it. This was exposed brilliantly by Eustace Mullins in 1979. There's a PDF you can access online. I had linked to it, but obviously I'm not on X anymore. So anyway, that's one rabbit hole people can go down if they want. Now, to come back to Nico's question, and a lot of this relates to what we talked about with Dr. Robert Malone, if Jason remembers. So a lot of this is related to 5th generation warfare, okay, cognitive warfare. So who are the parties involved here? The 3 parties, okay? There's the intel agencies, think Five Eyes. There's NATO-related outfits, and there's the military itself. So NATO-related outfits, for example, the NATO Association of Canada in fall 2021, they had their NATO Innovation Challenge, and I can read some excerpts from that. It's pretty wild. But in the U.S. military, have any of you heard something called something called IIAs, interactive internet activities? Have any of you ever heard of that?
No.
Any of you?
No.
Nobody?
Is that the monitoring of all the internet within Canada and how they are the RCMP, CSIS, GIS, all of them?
No.
Okay.
It's more influence operations. Okay, so in one of my posts, I write about this extensively because I was interviewed by Sean on SGT Report, and we talked about this, and he wasn't familiar with these internet interactive activities, IIAs, either. So they're essentially covert military operations that use geographically dispersed, meaning around the world, U.S. combat commanders to conduct operations which seek to control various news organizations, and I had provided on that show, John, it's on my Substack article too, with a June 8, 2007 memorandum by the U.S. Secretary of Defense Gordon England outlining the operation. And just to read from the first page, the scope: this policy applies to public affairs activities and to programs, products, and actions that shape emotions, motives, reasonings, behaviors of selected foreign entities. They have on their second page, they have the media, section on media, the combatant commanders, and ASDPA, I'm not sure what all of those acronyms mean, will ensure that only public affairs personnel engage in interactive internet activities with journalists employed by media organizations, including news, websites, online bulletin boards, blog sites affiliated with news organizations, They go on and so on and so on. It is the responsibility of all combatant commanders to determine when the internet communications of specific individuals and websites rise to a level equivalent to a news organization. Hence, when a channel like Sean on SGT get too big on YouTube or whatever, then the combatant commanders go in here, and it continues. But I can give you some examples here for Canada if you want to be more for like the Canadian military, NATO, Canada. They have these types of operations. So I have an article also on my website, is how NATO is committing cyber warfare against the global masses. And I talk about how Canada does this with the NATO Association of Canada. So like I said, in 2021, they had the fall 2021 NATO Innovation Challenge. Okay, and they described these cognitive warfare tactics. Okay, so I could just read couple of quick paragraphs and then I'll be done. Cognitive warfare seeks to change not only what people think, but also how they act. The Canadian government wrote in its official statement on the challenge, quote, attacks against the cognitive domain involve the integration of cyber, disinformation/misinformation, psychological and social engineering capabilities, end quote. Ottawa's press release continued, listen to this. Cognitive warfare positions the mind as a battle space and contested domain. Its objective is to sow dissonance. Do we see a lot of that? Instigate conflicting narratives. We see a lot of that too. Polarize opinions and radicalize groups. Cognitive warfare can motivate people to act in ways that can disrupt or fragment an otherwise cohesive society. You see it, guys. It's all divide and conquer, left, right, blue, red. To summarize, intel agencies, NATO-related outfits, the military itself. This is war, and we are their enemy.
100% divide and conquer, one of the oldest things in the book. We know that this has been around forever. And to answer Nico's question myself, 100%, dude. And it's not jealousy, because if you go through my show from the very beginning, I've been calling a bunch of people to come to the microphone. Let's get more people out there. If we only had a couple, then they would shut us down. We need to have thousands. Dan's actually an example. Dan was on my show. I said, you got to do a podcast. Like, you got to keep doing this. Because I believe that, and I know Wayne does the same thing too. He encourages people to pick up the microphone and go. So there's not jealousy when I say this next statement. There's absolutely people that would be considered alt or independent, or they call themselves independent, that are being boosted somehow, whether it's the platform, whether it's knowing how to use the platform, whether it's an organization that's getting it done for them. I don't know, because I didn't get invited to that party, but I absolutely see this happen all the time. The last 10 months, you highlighted that particular period. That has been a very fishy period, because it seems like the whole shift is moving to online. It looks like this is where the next media is going to be. It's one, I believe it's one. But then you see these, they come from traditional media, they come from legacy media, and then boom, they blow up huge on alt media. They get the big guests who are never able to come on. The guests take off their tie and relax a little bit more and speak a little bit broader. But they don't go on like Joe Rogan, but they'll go on this other one out of the blue. And there seems to be a pattern. And I think Wayne is correct when he says it's a business model now. They're following a business model. And I don't think this is by coincidence. I think it's by design. I think it's also to kind of recapture the new media space, the online presence like we're doing right now here tonight. It's a way to capture it and continue that going. And when Dan talks about like military being involved, 100%. I think so, 100%, because at the end of the day, intelligence is what they're controlling. And Pat, I'm sure he's going to get into a couple of videos, but he knows the danger of open source. Most of his, if not all of his evidence against him in his trial was him online in looking at a camera talking. So they know how to use this against people. If you're not in line with them, they're going to use it to hurt you. Pat's a great example. And then they're also going to explode the ones that do get in line. whether they just want to have fluffy conversations, try to make them their guests look like really good people now, down earth type of people, whatever. But somehow over the last 10 months, right before the election, there was an explosion on this, and I think you nailed it, Nico. So Pat, I know you're itching to share a video, so I can see that on screen here. So I'm gonna throw it to you, Nico. If there's anything you want to add there before we go to Pat, because I think it ties in perfectly with what we're talking about.
I'm just here to ask questions, brother. I talk about this stuff every single day. I'm just happy to have you guys on so that you guys can actually talk about it. But Pat, if you, I see you're going to show us video of yourself. That's kind of cocky, Pat.
Well, no,
Just a
what
tiny
it,
bit, right?
what it is I was watching these bills, C6, C9, C63, all of these online hate bills. And as I'm watching these online hate bills coming out, I watch, and this comes out just at the right time. So I'm just going to play it, and then I'll kind of break it down in some pieces for you. But give me 1 second. I'll hit play. Good day, ladies and gentlemen. So, as promised, I'm going to carry on with today's content and add to the series that I'm going to build for you guys. A little step-by-step of what's happening here in Canada. As you saw from yesterday's post, I posted about thousands of Canadian politicians that are being lobbied and taken for free trips over to Israel, and basically being pitched how they can better humanity by following Israeli guidelines. Okay, and I'm saying Israeli guidelines. I'm saying it's Israel. I'm saying Benjamin Netanyahu. I'm stating a fact here, ladies and gentlemen. And in these videos, you're going to find out. You're going to find out exactly this. Watch this one, and we'll be back.
With Charlie's assassination and with the kind of trajectory that we see with like Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson, I guess I'm curious about what's another game plan if we lose evangelical support for the state of Israel. What's our backup plan to be strong, like outside the diaspora?
The woke right. And he said, I call it the woke Reich. That's a brilliant. A lot of this is done with money. Money of NGOs, vast. Money of governments, vaster. Okay? We have to fight back. We're going to have to use the tools of battle. You know, the weapons change over time. And the most important ones are the social media. And the most important purchase that is going on right now is class. TikTok. TikTok. Number one. And I hope it goes through because it can be consequential. And the other one, what's the other one? That's most important. X. That's very good. And, you know, so we have to talk to Elon. He's not an enemy. He's a friend.
All right. So you watch that video. Why do you call it a weapon? Why is Benjamin Netanyahu calling this a weapon? The weapon of social media. I had the great pleasure of flying to Montreux, Switzerland in 2019 and covering a Bilderberg conference. And in that Bilderberg conference, they discussed one major topic, and that was the weaponization of social media. How to use it to benefit countries. How to spin a narrative. CEOs from Google, CEOs from major media corporations were there. We also had Dominic Bertrand, who was the CEO of McKinsey Inc. We also had none other than Canada's own Mark Carney there. We had Louise Arbour, who was pushing the UN Migrant Compact. And we had another gentleman by the name of Michael Sabia, who at one time was the former CEO of Quebec Pension Plan, which had allocated funds from a lot of equalization payments in it. Quebec's in. Okay, so you get the kind of gist of that. We can stop sharing that, but you get the gist. You've got these Mossad-style intelligence agencies within the world, within, you know, these elite countries manipulating your online media, and this is what you're seeing there. Those were big online content creators in the United States, and this is just shortly after the Charlie Kirk incident. And this was what Netanyahu did immediately, was to get the narrative back, get it back in their hands, get the controllers, get the basically he's saying we're going to be the handler of these social media online creators. And this is a consistent thing that we see everywhere. Look at Rachel Gilmore, right? Rachel Gilmore is number one. She's a big one. If you know who Rachel is in Canada, that's another one. Anti-Hate Canada, Anti-Hate Network. These kind of places, like, we're being played. And like you guys, I'm sure a lot of you, oh, well, maybe you're doing this, you're doing that, you're taking money, you're a division, and it sows that seed within, the Truth Teller Network, that if you don't poke at the right angles in this, I'm a firm believer that if it's right in your face, you might want to believe it. And if people don't see this, what's going on. Another good one is watch what's called the Great Hack. And you'll watch in the Great Hack how they manipulate the social media against you. And there's actually people that are fine-tuning your algorithms to keep you in an echo chamber. I also know that, and I'll land my plane on this one, X, the marketing agent from X, talking about how we are trying to share content on X, and it's getting shadow banned or no views or anything like that. And it's incredible. It's music that we did during the convoy, videos that were discussing things with the convoy, and Donald Trump things. And we were told by the marketing agent, head of Canadian marketing for X, that anything that has to do with the convoy or had anything to do with Trump in Canada, it's actually grabbed and put into its own little echo chamber and will not be released. And that is due to the Canadian government putting those standards in. We see it with CBC. We see it with the manipulation of their narrative on what you're doing. It's a propaganda war, and they have control over it. So people such as ourselves, this I'm sure is an echo chamber. I probably only got 50 or 60 views on my live tonight because of the topics that we're talking about. The algorithm grabs it and manipulates it.
The Blue Jays. That's why nobody's getting any views. The Blue Jays are playing.
Oh, geez, yeah.
And come on now.
Gladiator games, right, Wayne? Gladiator games. What do you do to the mob? Give them the gladiator games. Throw bread at
bread and circuses. Bread and circuses. 100%. Guys, since we all seem to agree that knowingly or unknowingly, some of the biggest content creators, the conservative I'm talking about, that have exponentially grown over the past 10 years, over the past 10 months, might doing it on purpose or might not be doing it on purpose, the result is the same. They're being manipulated into pushing an agenda that we all, at least on this panel in the comment section, don't want. So it's one thing for us to address the problems like we've been talking about over the past hour and 40 minutes, but we need to give people some type of answer as to, is it too late, or are people waking up? And if they are, is there a way we can fight what's going on right now, or is it too late?
That's an excellent question. We'll go to Matt next, but Nico, like, either you're on board or the laws will be used against you because there's no rule of law. You're seeing this all over the place, 8, 9, etc., and they're going to take you out if you don't get on board. I got the chills watching that video from Pat because NGOs can do it fast, but countries can do it faster. Oh, okay. So I'm going to throw it to Matt on that one because boy, did that bother me.
Yeah, that was disgusting, and the hubris of it all. To be in front of cameras and to still just say that completely out in the open, and it's a disgusting type of hubris, right? To feel like you're untouchable. Yeah, it's gross. So that being said, it's not an easy question at all. I mean, it's easy in the sense of like the simple answer is there. How to get to it practically is not so simple. In the sense that I alluded to it earlier, like when you look at what your enemy is afraid of, you could see that there has been moments in history where the axe has come down on humanity in an effort to consolidate sort of techno-feudal, even before the idea of technocracy. There were efforts to restore feudalism, abolish the freedoms that had been won over blood and fire over generations on several occasions that anybody can examine, explore, and internalize as these lessons in history where there are big battles that have been almost completely obscured and written out of our textbooks because the oligarchy doesn't want us to think that there's ever been a viable fight against their power structure. If anything, they want us to believe either that things are just hunky-dory and just stay in your illusion, or if you are allowed to take the red pill and sort of like shake yourself out of your illusions, you have to believe that all sides have been always equally controlled all the time, and there's never really ever been any hope. 1776, you've got narratives being spun, promoted even now by Candace Owens, saying that 1776 was actually not a revolution that was legitimate. It was a Freemasonic satanic agency that just created a fake illusion. She put a whole show based on a Anglican bishop who taught her that that this was the case. This wise Anglican bishop that groomed and educated her about her own nation's revolution, which is actually just a giant Freemasonic evil fraud that uprooted and undermined the divine right of kings, which was the more established natural order to organize society in a more natural way, which the revolutionary period under. So I see that this is like a lot of psyopic garbage. I like Candace Owens as a person. I think she's brilliant in many ways. But when we're talking, I just brought her as an example, when we're talking about influencers who may not be aware of how they've become, through their own blind spots, agents of an operation which is going to lead to the destruction of their own followers despite themselves. That's, I think, one case study of a very toxic way of thinking, or a very toxic narrative that's being inserted into the critical thinking zeitgeist, which then comes to the conclusion that, well, maybe everything was always a fraud. Everything that I thought was good was bad. And thus you get very black-pilled, very cynical. That's not good. So when I'm saying that I've seen demonstrations of people getting their shit together, not falling for traps, being smarter and staying above the narrative games and games within games, and coming out by preserving humanity's dignity and freedom in spite of the oligarchy, that involved utilizing certain powers that were, again, won over time and made more perfect, like the instrument of the sovereign nation state. If people have noticed that the oligarchy has been obsessed with destroying the sovereign nation state system. We hear this concept of New World Order, one world government. There's a variety of names, but it always involves the same thing, which is get rid of the institution of the sovereign nation state, which empowered the deplorable elected class, right, to have an influence over their destiny. That has to be eliminated. The nation state as it's kind of like a metaphysical technology. It's not a physical technology like a machine I can hold in the physical world, but the idea of a constitution, of the laws of a society. They have to work together. They have different functions, but they work together for a purpose. Some constitutions, some nations can be inferior to others based upon the concepts that originated in their wiring. But it gives people, when it's done well, and when the culture understands their responsibilities as citizens and not simply subjects to be taken care of by some higher power, but really active citizens that are the government, that are participating and have responsibilities to keep the government in check and to participate in understanding what's going on, what the policies are, and to ensure that it improves year to year for your kids and the grandkids to come after. When that's there, this thing has been used, as we saw with John F. Kennedy. His brother Robert Kennedy, though, was killed too early, would have become president and had a very strong idea that wasn't just him or John earlier by themselves. It wasn't just Lincoln by themselves. It was a network of people who collaborated, who had an insight into this thing, that were able to use the power of the Constitution, of the laws, in order to break the power structure of this private, supranational, hereditary elite that aspires to restore feudalism and forever wars, like new crusades of getting each to fight all forever, so that as we're divided, as we're always fighting, civilization against civilization, culture against culture, language group against language group, as long as everyone's always divided, they're never able to realize that they have the same enemy, and they will accept the depopulation, they'll accept the mass stupidity, they'll accept the destruction of the knowledge that they used to have, as they become more and more embedded within systems of neo-feudalism, as we have now being discussed by people like Peter Thiel and others, with the idea of getting, or Curtis Yarvin, the guru of Peter Thiel and the whole Silicon Valley transhumanist class. They've got this whole idea of replacing nation states with little baronial city states, and I mean, a lot of them have the service of many high-level Green Berets and special operations figures who, you know, they cut their teeth in you know, places like Afghanistan, in Iraq. They did a lot of killing. They participated in this thing, and all of a sudden we see the spread of these influencers who have these special forces, Green Beret, intelligence operation backgrounds that are also seeding narratives that have a lot of truth to them, but also have some Trojan horses that are nudging people, their listeners who don't believe in the mainstream media, towards outcomes that are going to have them fall for the traps that the followers of Hitler also fell for, to the expense of their own existence, which was all based upon the idea that created Israel to begin with. It was the Havara Agreement, you know, but that the Nazis did with the British Empire in 1933 that ensured that you had the influx of all of these Jews from you know, Russia, from Europe, that were brought into the Middle East to reconstruct. You know, Eichmann he taught himself Hebrew so that he could study Kabbalah, because they had this idea of bringing about a new world order premised around a certain eschatological idea of well, something really nasty that's still a thought today when you hear Pete Hegseth going in and speaking that it's his commitment in Israel to rebuild the third temple. He literally believes that, but he also believes that that's tied to something that can only happen after a cataclysm. I don't know if he necessarily believes in the rapture, but he definitely believes that human beings are instruments of God, and that God demands some form of cataclysm out of which the fires, a new type of human being can emerge. And he does believe in the kingdom of Jerusalem, this Crusader Templar Knights of Malta kingdom that, you know, was at the heart of the entire Crusades 1,000 years ago. They want to bring that back. That's a big commitment, but that involves getting the Arabs and the Jews that are there to destroy each other. And then you can have some weird thing to trigger some new world order. So that's also in the play. So all that's to say, for the solution, I'll be quick now, get nation states to take the power away from the financial oligarchy. That can happen. There's ways that has happened before. It could happen again. There's certain nations in Eurasia that have made moves that are much better than what we've seen in Europe towards that effect, that can drain the swamp and restore the power of the nation state in an appropriate way. But we're very far from that. I mean, our population is psychologically and mentally just so far from understanding any of that history and how that works, that I don't know if we have the ability at this point to do that before something really bad happens. It's a big question mark for me.
It's a huge question mark for me, and I got to tell you, you five guys make me feel a little bit smarter after sitting here for almost 2 hours. Wayne, we're going to be wrapping up here. We're on our last 15 minutes or so, and I'm sorry, Matt, but anytime I hear oligarchy, I think of Bernie Sanders now. For some reason, that triggers me.
Yeah, he took that word away from us.
He did, yeah.
I think it behooves us to remember that Mark Carney's wife, Diana Fox Carney, is none other than an understudy of Francis Fox Piven, the writer of the Cloward Piven strategy. But here in Canada, they have adopted a policy called PAR, which is a Participatory Action Research Program, which is what they use to create collaborative research approach where researchers and community members work together to understand and solve real world problems that affect the community real time. And this is where all things, as they, steel sharpens steel, they sharpen us, we sharpen them, and we force them to ever adapt and improvise and overcome to keep us planted. Now, to come to the last part of it is and Matt, I'd love to have a discussion with you at a later date on this, but the whole concept of nation states with borders ruled by laws is relatively a newer phenomena the last couple 300 years, where everything before that was kingdoms, empire, territories, those kinds of things, and you could keep it if you could hold it. And so this is where this major shift, in the grand scheme of things, this constitution that the America has established, the great experiment, is a long ways from over, and they don't like it. And as far as, can we get out of it? I'm 100% still convinced that for Canada, 1776 is the cure for 1984. But what does that mean? That means a separation from being line items on the Crown's asset sheet and establishing a form of government in a likeness, perhaps, of America, but something that is ruled by laws that make us all equal, which we will never have in this current situation. So I think that there's hope. I think that necessity is the mother of all inventions, and I've been at this for a long time now. And when I first started, there was very few of us. Now there are many, and they are having to get ever more and more adaptive to try and keep us from becoming coordinated and organized and understanding. But here's the thing: clarity is power. And this is what they fight, the most, is for us to have any form of clarity. There are a lot of middle managers and witting and unwitting people whose roles are to serve to be, running the fog machines and altering the mirrors to keep the smoke and mirrors going, to keep us from finding that clarity that can bring us back to an equality of humanity. And Matthew's right. They want the Game of Thrones back. They're not happy with us becoming wealthy and powerful and outside of their control. And in Canada's case, Carney was here to be the economic hitman to bring us into alignment under dependence of the UBI, digital ID, all of those things that are required for them to move forward with their new one world order. And it's not going to plan. So I have hope and faith. And to me, the king always has one more move.
The king always has, and he also has a queen, has a bishop and rook. A lot of things. So Dan, one way to kill a magician, because you said this is magic and they're trying to distract us. Houdini was killed with a gut punch. So what's the gut punch in this one? So how do we provide a gut punch to the bankers possibly?
Yeah, I would say, so if we're talking solutions, okay, there's three things I would just kind of wrap up with. Number one, Sun Tzu, The Art of War. Okay, know your enemy and know yourself. Okay, and you have to know yourself, because there's evil and there's good in everyone, but you have to examine yourself. So start with yourself. Okay, number two is the only way we would get out of this, because all they care about is narrative and divide and conquer. So how do you counter that? You counter that with unity. Okay, reaching out to your neighbor that, might have like very, very different ideology than yours. Try to find common ground. So unity. We saw that with the truckers convoy, obviously, right? It's very powerful. So unity is number two. Number three, and I'll end with, of course, don't forget God in there too. Okay, we can talk about that. God and faith is very important too. But I'll end with what I mentioned earlier. Okay, and nothing's ever going to change until people know the real enemy. And in my opinion, the real enemy is the international banking cabal. Nobody is focused on them, including most of the alternative media. Nobody. Okay, so if you're tuning in first time watching this show, what is the international banking cabal? Well, read a little bit about it. Read about the Bank for International Settlements. Learn how the bank, the central banks really work. How is money made? Just learn some of the basics, because the average Joe or Jane on the street really doesn't know even what is money, right? What is currency? So anyway, I think those are my three suggestions for solutions.
Absolutely. I kind of like that a lot, because I'd like to end with some sort of solutions, or at least the idea of a solution, because holy smokes, if you go through this, you're going to be definitely very depressed to understand where we sit. You guys have been a wonderful panel tonight, and where I think the solutions are panels just like this, conversations just like this. Until they actually take it away from us, we got to use this power, because it is very powerful. Having Pat here explaining to us and showing us videos brings a whole bunch of us together. And Nico, you're doing a great job bringing God back to the table and Christianity back to the table as well. I'm very, very proud of you for that. Matt, keep writing. Looking forward to that book this Christmas. Maybe you'll send me a copy and I'll take a look at it as well. And Wayne, you've been an encouragement to a lot of us who do this kind of stuff to go ahead and group it together, do it together. It's a community thing, because without it, we could just be picked off individually. And then Dan, you're one of my favorite people, because we met because you were out there outspoken, having lots of things to say. I grabbed you to a show because I want to learn more. Like, what the hell? What's this guy talking about? Who's this Carney guy? And look at you. You're now 10,000 strong on Substack, and you're doing a great job, and you're educating people. Almost. So go and subscribe.
It drops by like 50 subscribers, so I have to inch my way back up. But
we'll get you there
soon. Maybe 10K in a week, in a week or two. Or I'm making a long post about my almost 3 years on Substack, which I hope to publish in a couple of weeks too.
Okay.
So stay tuned.
Very good. But what I want to do now is kind of put it to Pat and the rest of the panel and Nico as well. What is a quick solution? Not a quick solution. What's your solution quickly? Because we're on our last few minutes here. Pat?
So I'll give you a quick one, and I think this one would make a solid mark on the world. And I think we take a little lesson from what Italy did. I think a massive Canadian-wide citizens strike for a minimum of 1 week. If it could be obtained, I don't know. It's a daunting task and to get to, but I think if we would send a solid message that we're actually in charge. Nobody goes to work for 1 week, and I think sometimes suffering the repercussions of that in the long grand scheme of things, I think it would end up being very positive to try and turn or sway what they're trying to implement. It would definitely make them take a step back and take a look at, oh shit, Canadian citizens they're sending a message, and that you don't even have to leave your house. Just that something simple like that could send shockwaves. Remember what the convoy did when the rest of the world saw it? They were like, oh shit, somebody pissed off the good old Canadians. Oh, we embarrassed the United States. You would think something like that would have went to the United States, but Canada stepped up. We showed everybody, look what we can do. Now imagine what we can do if the whole country got on board, left and right, everybody out there, just take a week off. Don't go to work. That's it. Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, just hang out for a bit. We'll do a little after show as well. That'll be a tough one, but that's a nice little idea. Nico, I'll get you to wrap it up. Matt, is there a quick anything you can give us?
Just to resubstantiate what Dan Fournier had mentioned, I think that the banking system that we're sitting on is a time bomb. It's going to blow. It's going to kill a lot of people. It's designed to do that. And so the question isn't will it blow up? It's when is it going to blow up and under what conditions, and what are going to animate the new system that will be brought online? Is it going to be something that's going to be in the service of humanity or in the service of the oligarchy against humanity? Is in my mind the full question. So, I mean, to have a citizens movement that actually has an understanding of certain aspects of like, what is Glass-Steagall? How did the banks get broken up under the Canadian Four Pillars during World War II? Like, how do you bring back the four pillars that were undone by Brian Mulroney when they created universal banking? That could be done conceptually, but it requires people who are much more knowledgeable about such things, such that the bankers take their losses, that the bomb explodes in their face, not in the face of the people, and certain things, certain concepts that should have been elementary school knowledge, which are today not even, they're wiped out in university-aged students in economics. They don't know this at all. The basic principles of national banking. How does productive credit get emitted to build up a real economy that's in the service of the people, that benefits the individual as well as the whole? These are really fundamental things that we should have a movement that is educative and that is organized around making certain demands that are concrete that demand that these things be done by the powers of the sovereign nation state, which is the people, before the blowout, because after it's too late, you can't do anything. So there's a lot more I could say, but those are the way, that's the way I'm thinking. It's really about, in my mind, the culture and the banking system, first and foremost. So I would back up Dan on that point.
Awesome. We're going to hear a lot more from you in the next little bit, I'm sure of it. So Wayne, so I guess we take that grenade, pull the pin, and throw it back at the bankers.
Localism is the 100% safe and effective cure for globalism. If we remove the need for using their determined currency for every transaction that we engage in, we remove all of their power, right? So I too am inspired by what I saw in Italy. A government a nationwide shutdown would remove that. And here's the thing: we're up against a beast that is ever and ever more ravenous, and that is what feeds it. And the sooner we starve it and end it without sacrificing our society, that is the path to ending the domination of the control of the currency and the corruption, and then to establish a nation that allows Canadians to legitimately have their rights to their own future self-determination. I think that's and when I say 1776 is the cure for 1984, I'm not talking about the revolution. I'm talking about the seating of the Constitution, that made America a country that was run by laws and equality for all, not what we have up here in Canada, which is mob rule by whichever oligarch is the best earner for the crown. So that's kind of my thoughts on it. But I have faith in humanity. Like I say, to me, God wins. I've accepted that I don't necessarily get to be here when that happens. We have this thing that we want to see it. We want it now. We live in an instant gratification society where people want to push an easy button and get the result that they want, just like every time they say something in front of their telephone, 4 ads pop up to solve that problem. That's not reality. And we've got to get out of this Avatar Ready Player One mindset of thinking that controls our universe and get back to prime reality, because that's where people bleed and die in. And that's where we need to focus our energy in. So that's my closing rant. And you can find out more. Chase me Monday to Friday. I'm everywhere.
You're awesome, Wayne. Thank you so much for that. And Nico, here we go. They actually made the World Series Game 7 on our evening just to kind of screw up our audience. They went through a lot of power to pull that off. I'm sure of it, right? But Nico, what do you think about tonight, and what are your closing comments? Because we're going to wrap up.
The World Series is nothing more than bread and circuses. That's all it is. I've said it so many times, but this is what it's all about. Now, I'm going to just reiterate what Dan Fournier said. Learn about money. If you have 3.5 hours and you want to learn about money, there's a 1996 documentary called Money Masters that breaks it down. It is absolutely brilliant. Dry as hell. It is not meant to entertain. It is meant to educate. But it breaks down the way money came to be and how money actually works and how central banking works. It is a brilliant documentary. It's 30 years old. It's still available on YouTube. I would push what Pat said even more. I've spoken about this in the past, but that's the type of shit that gets you in trouble. Not only shouldn't we work for a week, but we should stop doing our taxes in March. Just don't do it. Just don't fill any of the forms. Just let it go. See what happens. You want to cripple a government? Prevent them from having your money. Because remember, governments do not generate money. The only money that they get is through taxation. But the most important thing, I know for me, put your faith in God. Because this is meant to happen. It's going to get worse before it gets better. But the key point is it will get better.
Thank you very much, Nico. You're awesome, and I do appreciate that. And maybe this is why Carney's rolling in automatic taxes, where your taxes will be filed automatically for you. This is coming. So maybe that's exactly why they're trying to cut you off at the knees there. But everybody, thank you very much for hanging out with us instead of the World Series. This was a lot more fun. I learned a ton. And Nico, 2 weeks, November 15th, we'll be back with another big panel. We'll announce that soon. It's going to be just as big as this one. And if you haven't followed all of us yet, please do that. If you're watching this, you can go see our little handles all over the place. And let's get Dan to 10,000 subscribers on Substack. All right, everybody, have yourself a great night. Enjoy yourself. Take care of each other. Love you all. And God bless.